Hi, I'm Prof Andrew Coats. I'm a heart failure cardiologist, presently scientific director of the Heart Research Institute in Sydney. Well, empagliflozin, we all know, was the first treatment shown to improve major outcomes in HFpEF. So that was an absolute groundbreaking trial, the Emperor Preserve trial. Now what we're looking at is what we can glean out of that trial, so sub-studies, new analyses, and I'm presenting today our first analysis that really looks at diastolic dysfunction and the impact that has on the benefits of empagliflozin. Emperor Preserve was a land-breaking trial, so major clinical outcome study, over 5,000 patients with HFpEF. It included what we now call mildly reduced ejection fraction and truly preserved ejection fraction, but we know the results were even across the board. So we looked at the whole trial, but we looked at the inclusion of the baseline observations. And in some of these patients, there was echo evidence of objective diastolic dysfunction. And no one's ever published on the impact of that baseline diastolic dysfunction on treatment responses, particularly with the SGLT2 inhibitors. So that's what we looked at. So a whole patient trial database, but looking at them subdivided by the presence or absence of diastolic dysfunction at baseline. What we found is that, very profoundly, that the presence of diastolic dysfunction predicted a much greater therapeutic response to empagliflozin. It was quite clear and it was graded. So we had measures of diastolic dysfunction. It was one of three parameters, a left atrial enlargement parameter, E to E prime ratio, or the presence of left ventricular hypertrophy. And if you had one of those, you had a better response to empagliflozin. If you had two or more, you had a dramatically better response to empagliflozin. So it was really a very, very strong predictor of response to empagliflozin on both the primary outcome, the composite of cardiovascular mortality and heart failure hospitalization, or on total heart failure hospitalizations. Take-home message would be that we know that empagliflozin is indicated for all HFpEF. We know its response is independent of ejection fraction, but we don't know exactly how it works. So this is now telling us that if you've got diastolic dysfunction on the echo, even a mild signal from the echo report, then that's a compelling indication to say this patient's really going to benefit. So if you're a bit on the borderline, I don't know, whether for drug budget reasons or you're not certain about this patient, will they tolerate another drug? If they've got one of these diastolic dysfunction parameters that's very easy to detect, you've got a compelling reason to say, I've got to overcome my hesitancy, reservations, concerns. I really need to get this started straight away. Well, SGLT2 inhibitors are a fascinating drug class. They've got benefits. Started life as a treatment for hyperglycemia and type 2 diabetes. To be honest, that class was seen as a modest, almost third-line agent. And then because of the need to prove they didn't have an adverse outcome on cardiovascular endpoints, we had the EMPA-REG outcome study, which was the first really big positive trial to show a positive protection for major cardiovascular outcomes, including total mortality. So it was a game changer. Then subsequently we've seen in HFrEF, in HFpEF, in chronic kidney disease, we're seeing substantial benefits from the SGLT2 inhibitors, particularly empagliflozin and dapagliflozin. And so we know that these drugs are having profound benefits in diseases that we never would have expected based on the simple assessment of the mode of action. So we don't really know why they're working. So you only have to think out of the box and think, what other diseases are a little bit like heart failure and chronic kidney disease, where there's something chronic disease, ill health, management, pathophysiology that these drugs might work. So I think there's potentially a large amount of areas of research that the SGLT2 inhibitors could go forward. Whether that's commercially funded by big pharma, I don't know, but certainly I think that people will be asking questions about how do they work and where else could they work.